The state will begin to pay back school districts $1.3 billion of money they are owed, with another $1.1 billion still outstanding. Steve Senate sat down with the new chair of the E12 Education Committee, Senator Charles Wiger, to get his take on the payback of the school budget shift and also on education priorities.
Senator Wiger, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
The latest state budget forecast had some good news. $1.3 billion will now be paid to schools on time. That's about a little bit more than half of what the state essentially borrowed from schools to balance its books.
Yes, it's an IOU, and we have an obligation to pay that back. Not all of it is going to be paid back. Of that $1.3 billion, we will pay back approximately half of that, a little over $500 million, in the next few days, and then the rest of that will be metered out through the rest of the fiscal year in bi-monthly payments or so. And those payments will be listed on the Department of Education website, or you call your local school district. And then beyond that, hopefully when we look at the February forecast and beyond, we'll continue on the progress that's being made and can make that obligation to pay the IOU to the students and provide the stability that's needed for funding.
What does that really mean for school districts? So if they receive the money more quickly from the state rather than later in the year, what does it really mean?
It provides real resources. It means they don't have to borrow. Many school districts have had to borrow because of the shortfall, so having cash in hand gives them the ability to pay off some of the debt for borrowing they've had to incur due to us. It gives them the opportunity to provide additional resources to meet program needs.
Do you consider delaying payments to schools a gimmick, and can the state move away from that financing technique?
I do consider it a gimmick when you're at the 64.3% actually. If you owe $10, 64.3% was the schedule for paying back, and that was kicking the can, and there was a lot of discussion about it, but it was an accounting gimmick, and we need to be straight. When we do an appropriation, we honor that, and so we're going to be on track as the resources become available, and in this case we are doing that $1.3 billion payback. There still is a 1.1.
There's $2.4 billion total that were withheld from the schools.
Right.
Do you think that the state can make that up within the next 2 years?
Not within this biennium, but we'll wait and see and what the projections are. We'll do it responsibly. We'll do it with stability, and also look at recommendations that are in a new task force that has come out by the Department of Education.
I want to get to that because that's a hot topic here at the Capitol,
yes.
Education funding. A task force appointed by the Minnesota Department of Education recommended that the state increase aid to schools by 7%, about $633 million per year. Do you believe funding to that degree is achievable, and is it necessary?
There's a need for funds for sure. We need to provide additional resources. I believe the report, which is going through a lot of discussion now and even more in session, would call for a phase-in of that $600 million over 4 years. Again, we'll be looking at the February forecast. We're going to be looking at the revenue in terms of reforms in property, income, and sales. But keep in mind that we're doing this because we have a constitutional obligation under Article 13, Section 1, for our form of government to have a well-educated population. And the framers of our Constitution asked us to come up with a general, uniform system for our schools and to provide the resources to do that. And we just need to provide a stable means of doing it. And this task force has come up with a number of recommendations to get us there, and we need the resources.
And you are now charged with the Education Finance Committee, leading that committee, and
yes.
That will be an issue before you. Will a priority be for you to provide more funding to schools from the state than currently is provided?
Absolutely.
To what degree?
That'll be dependent on the revenue forecast in February. We have to live within our means, and we aren't going to overreach where we don't have a realistic amount of revenue, but we do need to be on a responsible track to provide the needed resources. We have a lot of good things happen in terms of results in our schools, and I can talk about it, but I'm also concerned about the achievement gap, problems in dropout rates, the number of students that aren't prepared for kindergarten, the number of students that don't graduate, that aren't ready, that do graduate to go to college. We need to do that. We need to provide some additional resources. The Commissioner's Task Force on Ed Finance talks about a number of things from early learning, kindergarten, throughout that journey, and so more resources will be needed, and we'll come up with a plan that'll put us on a responsible track to do that.
What's wrong with having local units of government, communities, help pay for their schools? I mean, doesn't that keep their skin in the game?
There's nothing wrong with that, and they do participate. The 340 or so local school districts elected by school boards. I was a school board member for many years before I came here, but all districts aren't equal, and the framers in our Constitution, again, talked about opportunities for all students. Our Supreme Court has talked about that. So whether you're from Washkish, Worthington, Wanamingo, or Worthington, you have that educational opportunity, and it should not be based on the property wealth of your district. So,
and you feel that's a problem today? That some school districts are lacking in funding compared to other districts?
Yes, and it's not only what I feel, that is clearly demonstrated in terms of the funding that goes. There are disparities that has been documented. It's also reflected when you do a drive-by in some districts and you see a district that nearby where you had a levy referendum pass and another one where it didn't, and it could be the same community. Then they might be deprived of program dollars because it didn't pass. In that Ed Task Force, they want to reduce that dependence on levy passage and put more money in the formula, which I do support.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but if you're going to put more money into the formula, how do you tie funding to success?
We know that a key part of the success is by having the most highly qualified teachers that we can hire, that we can retain in the system, and having principals, having curriculum that is put in place. We have a lot of that in statute and in rule, and by having trained teachers that are providing the instruction, high quality instruction on that, and then measuring it with good test results. We need to get better testing, and that's a part of the 7 points that the department will be focusing on next session. But we have curriculum, get the best teachers possible, and then there's testing results. I believe just recently we had some results that talked.
And we'll have to hold that for another program. And Senator Wiger, we want to congratulate you on your new post as the Education Finance Chair, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for your service.